Good afternoon. Today I'm going to be reviewing the Guanqin GJ16227. This watch is available from Guanqin official store on AliExpress for $136 US. Now I understand that during the 11/11 AliExpress sale the price will be reduced to $96 US. The sale starts on the 1st of November. So firstly, let's look at the box that the watch comes in, and then I'll talk you through the other items one gets with the piece. So the watch comes in this watch box, which is coated in a metallic plastic vinyl, as you can see, stitched around the perimeter. It has a hinged lid and the interior is finished to a good standard with vinyl plastic. The watch sits in the base on a padded pillow cushion, as one would expect, and the padded pillow cushion is also upholstered with vinyl plastic to a good standard. So nice presentation, bearing in mind this is a low tier price point piece at only $96 in the 11/11 sale. With regards to the items, this is the owner's instruction manual, clear concise diagrams. The instructions are in English and it details the operation of the movement used. Guanqin call the movement the caliber GL878, but it's actually a JHS19 automatic. This is the international guarantee card that comes with the watch, and I'm pleased to report the watch is covered by a 2-year international warranty. Usually watches at this price point, $96 would have a 12-month international warranty, so to get 2 years of warranty is good. One also gets this stainless steel pusher, and I'll show you what this is for. This is for activating the pusher on the left-hand flank of the case. And lastly, one also gets this sterile unbranded microfiber polishing cloth with the watch. So, with regards to the specifications of the piece, this is the Guanqin GJ16227. The watch is clearly an homage to the Richard Mille RM11-03, so similar proportions to the RM11-03. We have a 44.6mm case diameter. We have a 51.7mm lug-to-lug measurement, a thickness of 16mm, and the integrated lug width at the widest point of the case and also the integrated rubber strap is 28.4mm. Now, the integrated silicone rubber strap tapers from 28.4 at the lugs down to 20mm at the buckle and tang. Sterile buckle and tang, and this is a clear cost-cutting measure, and even at $96 I think it's unacceptable. This should have the Guanqin brand logo or emblem engraved. But having said that, it's got a heavy gauge of metal to the 3160 grade stainless steel buckle, no sharp edges, no burrs, brushed satin finish to the top side, underside and flanks. 2 keepers on the silicone rubber strap. One's fixed into position by 2 nubs, which I'll show you either side of the keeper. I've seen this on other silicone rubber straps and I think it's a good design. These 2 nubs either side of the silicone rubber strap engage either side of the first keeper and they lock it into position so it doesn't slide out of position. Now the second keeper floats up and down the strap as one would expect. Now I'm going to show you something I'm critical of and I'll explain why. If you look closely at the second keeper, you can see that they have moulded time tries all into the second keeper. Now, unfortunately, they haven't put any spaces between time, tries and all, so time tries all looks like one word, and it's nonsense. I don't think that watch brands should mould these kind of philosophical quotes into watch straps. I don't think watches should have philosophy anywhere on the watch. Time tries all means absolutely nothing. It's complete nonsense, and they really should delete this from the second keeper. Now, with regards to the rest of the specification, we have a domed hardlex crystal, and I want to give credit where credit's due here because Guanqin haven't been dishonest about this. Often with Richard Mille homages I've previously reviewed, the resellers and the AliExpress stores are dishonest about the type of crystal they use in these homages. For example, they will state that it's sapphire crystal when in actual fact it's hardlex or mineral crystal, but Guanqin have been honest about this and they actually say on the AliExpress listing this is made from hardlex rather than sapphire crystal. Now, personally, I prefer to see sapphire crystal at this price point because sapphire crystal is harder and more scratch resistant than hardlex. Hardlex is mineral crystal which has been chemically treated in order to make it harder and more scratch resistant, and really it's a compromise between mineral crystal and sapphire crystal. Now, it does have a nice curved profile to the tonneau hardlex crystal, but the negative is there is no AR coating on the underside. So when I tilt the piece at an oblique angle, you can see there is a lot of glare and highly reflective nature to the silver mirror polished hands and also we can see the underside of the Hardlex crystal doesn't have any anti-reflective coating. So this really would benefit if it were upgraded to sapphire crystal with clear AR coating, because as you can see, the legibility is poor. The tonneau crystal curving acts like a curved mirror, and therefore it reflects. So very shiny, very glossy, like a mirror. With regards to the rest of the specification, we have a solid 316L grade stainless steel case, brushed satin finish to the top of the case, and we've got a matte bead blasted effect to the flanks to the case. We have a pusher which is recessed in the left hand flank, and on the right hand flank we have two pushers which operate the date complication and also the month complication. Now I'm going to be critical of the two pushers because if you look closely, there is yellow text above each of the pushers. The top pusher has date button and the lower pusher has month button. Now, I appreciate that this is an homage to the Richard Mille RM1103, which does have yellow text above each of the pushers, and they're trying to replicate that. They're trying to make it look like the RM1103. But however, putting button above the pusher is nonsense. It's apparent that these are pushers and you push them. One doesn't need to put button above them. So I really think they should delete button and simply have date on the lower pusher, date on the top pusher and month on the lower pusher. With regards to the crown, it's solid 316L grade stainless steel. We have a gold anodized ring and it's knurled finish to it, and we also have an engraving to the centre section of it, as you can see. So the proportion of the crown is good, it's finished to a good standard, no sharp edges, no burrs, and the quality of the anodizing to the gold ring is also good. It provides an effective hermetic seal to 50 metres. So let's test the push-pull crown execution. Now it is difficult to grip wearing gloves due to the overhang of the flank of the case, but pulling it out to the first click position is the time setting position. Now it does feel smooth, there's no resistance clockwise and anti-clockwise, however there is significant back play. If you look at my finger rotating the crown, see how much I can rotate the crown clockwise and anti-clockwise. Now if you look at the minute hand when I'm doing that, the minute hand isn't responding, and that's significant back play clockwise and anti-clockwise. What should happen is when one rotates the crown clockwise and anti-clockwise, there should be an immediate response. The minute hand should move clockwise and anti-clockwise in sync with the crown, but we have significant play there. That's the amount of back play we've got. So one has to turn the crown more clockwise and anti-clockwise in order to get the minute hand to respond. Now, the other negative is the hands are skeletonized rather than being fully loomed, and therefore that reduces the legibility. And also they're mirror polished, the facets on the edges are mirror polished, and therefore that makes them very shiny and reflective. And due to the lack of AR coating on the underside of the tonneau Hardlex crystal, you can see it's actually very difficult to read the hands, and they don't register very well against the applied indices with the skeletonized dial. So we're now in the time setting position. Now the other thing you'll note is if you look at the second hand, it continues to sweep around the dial. This movement doesn't have hacking, which is a negative, so it's not pleasant to set the time, although it does feel smooth. Now with regards to manually winding, in the closed position, as it's a push-pull crown rather than screw-down crown, one can manually wind the movements, which Guanqin call the caliber GL878, but it's actually a JHS19. One can manually wind it to its maximum 40-hour power reserve. Now manually winding does feel smooth. One can feel the tension in the mainspring gradually building up. In terms of sensation, it feels very similar to manually winding an 8215, so one can feel the resistance building up. Push-pull crown is acceptable, 50 metres is the minimum of water resistance, but it does do the job. Now, with regards to the two pushers, let's test the action of the two pushers. So the top pusher activates the dates complication. Now, if you look closely at the 12 o'clock position, at the date complication, you can see we have a double date, and both of the Arabic numerals click over with a nice positive click. Now the negative of this is there is no quick set complication. So for example, one cannot push down the pusher and hold it in to advance with a quick set on the date. If you're at the 1st of the month and you need to get to the 30th of the month, you have to press it 30 times. So it does work very well, but it is laborious. Nice firm resistance to the pusher, one has to really give it a hard push, but each day of the month clicks over with a nice positive click, and both of the dates wheels both click over in sync. So the alignment is correct, and they do have a nice positive click, nice firm resistance, but it's just laborious because one has to cycle through the full 30 days of the month, as I've detailed. The lower pusher activates the right-hand subdial. Now, if you look closely at the 3 o'clock position, you can see pressing the lower pusher activates the right-hand subdial at 3 o'clock. This is meant to represent the month. It has 12 clicks. So, for example, at the 12 o'clock position, one could say it's January, the next one is February, March, and so on. But there are no registers. For example, we don't have abbreviations like Jan, Feb, MAR for March. So, therefore, one has to memorise which of the positions is the month. For example, 12 is January, and 1 o'clock is February, and 2 o'clock is March, and so on. So really, this is for decorative purposes only, to make it look like the Richard Mille RM1103. I don't think any collector is actually going to use this complication to count the month. For example, you're not going to look at this and say it's April. And I think that really it's negligible. And certainly printing this month button in yellow text is abhorrent. They should delete that. Now, with regards to the 9 o'clock subdial, we have a pusher which is recessed into the left-hand flank of the case. Again, it's for decorative purposes. It serves no purpose whatsoever. Now, they do include, this is a bracelet pushpin resizing tool, and the intention is that you use that to press the pusher, but I personally prefer to use a wooden toothpick, and I'll explain why. The wooden toothpick has a sharper point to it, which engages in the dimple better, and the other thing is, if you slip out of it, you're not going to scuff or scratch the bead blasted effect to the flank. Now, if you use that metal bracelet pushpin tool, if you slip out of the dimple, you're going to scuff and scratch the case. So it makes more sense to use a wooden toothpick because this is softer and it's not going to scuff it, and it does engage better with the left-hand pusher. Now, same again, if you look at the 9 o'clock subdial, pressing it in advances the 9 o'clock subdial with a click. Now, I don't know what the purpose of this left-hand subdial is other than being decorative, because it doesn't have any registers on it, and we've already got a month complication, a month dates wheel on the 3 o'clock subdial. So this really is just for decorative purposes. One can push it in and make it click around, but doesn't actually serve any meaningful purpose. Now, with regards to the subdial at the 6 o'clock position, I'll show you that moving around. Again, it doesn't really serve any purpose. Now, when one cycles through 24 hours with the main hands, the hour and minute hand, you'll notice that the subdial hand at the 6 o'clock position also cycles around as if it was a second time zone subdial. So as you can see, when I'm rotating it round through the 24 hours, the 6 o'clock subdial hand moves around. And again, really it's for decorative purpose. It doesn't serve any meaningful purpose other than that. So it's just for the symmetry and to make it look like a Richard Mille RM1103, which this is an homage to. Right, so I'll give you a wrist shot and you can see how it fits on my 8-inch wrist. Now, the silicone rubber strap is soft and supple, and I actually think they've made the correct decision by using silicone rubber rather than FKM rubber, which is stiffer. It does look like a Richard Mille RM1103 vented strap, very similar proportions, and we've got the same vents. Now, the silicone rubber has a more matte finish to it. Now, the negative of silicone rubber being matte is it does attract a lot of dust and lint, and that is quite annoying. With FKM rubber straps, which are fluorine, they have a smoother, glossy finish to them, and they don't attract lint and dust as much as this matte finish. So it is very comfortable, but it constantly attracts lint, which is quite irritating. Now, if you look at the silicone rubber strap, you can see it's just long enough to engage the end of the strap in the two keepers, as you can see. So this will fit up to an 8-inch wrist, which is good. Now, clearly at 44.6mm diameter by 51.7 lug to lug, this is clearly made for collectors with a larger wrist of 7 to 8 inches. If you have a 6 to 7 inch wrist, you can immediately rule out this piece because it wears with too much wrist presence and it's also too tall for a smaller wrist. 16mm really is a ridiculous thickness. If you look at the thickness of this, needless to say, this is not going to slip easily underneath a shirt cuff if you wear business shirts. If it were 13mm, yes it would, but this is 3mm in excess of the sweet spot. 16 really is too tall for the tonneau case. Now this feels incredibly top heavy. It's 153 grams, which isn't actually heavy for a 44.6. 150 grams is the kind of heft one would expect with a 40mm piece on a solid oyster style bracelet. But bear in mind, this is on a silicone rubber strap, so you are carrying 153 grams on the head of the piece. So it's very tall at 16mm, it's very top heavy. The tonneau case does curve around the wrist, and the Caseback also curves around the wrist, so there isn't a gap, there is a snug fit, and the curved profile to the vented case also curves around the wrist very well. So it's a very snug fit, but it really does feel top heavy and therefore not comfortable to wear for long periods of time, such as 8 to 12 hours per day. So lots of wrist presence, clearly made for a collector with a larger wrist of 7 to 8 inches, but even on my 8-inch wrist, this does feel like a very large piece. 44.6mm diameter, and 51.7 is a very long lug-to-lug measurement. As you'll know from my previous reviews, 48mm is the sweet spot, 51.7 is nearly 52mm, so it's nearly 4mm in excess of the 48mm sweet spot. Very long case, very wide case, and also very tall. Now, with regards to the integrated silicone rubber strap, yes, they've made the correct decision by making it 28.4. It does need a wide silicone rubber strap to balance the weight and the wrist presence of the 44.6mm head of the piece, and 28.4 tapering down to 20 is the correct taper. It does look correct. So the silicone rubber strap is very comfortable, but the head of the piece is uncomfortable to wear. Very heavy and very top heavy, as you can see. Doesn't feel like a balanced piece. They really need to reduce this to 14mm or less in order to make it better balanced and lower profile. And I really think they should reduce the diameter from 44.6 down to 40 or 42 in order to make it more wearable. But as an homage to the Richard Mille RM1103, it does look visually very similar, and if you enjoy that kind of look, then you will enjoy the aesthetic of this GJ16227. Right, so I'll show you the Caseback. It has a screwed down Caseback made from solid 316L grade stainless steel, brushed satin finish to it. It's got a nice curved profile to it, which does wrap around the wrist very well. Very low profile, and it's glazed with mineral crystal. Engraved with the specification and the reference number of the piece, and screwed down with 8 screws, 4 on each of the flanks. The screwed down Caseback provides an effective hermetic seal to 50 metres, and it does a good job of displaying the movement used, which Guanqin call the caliber GL878, but it's actually the GHS19. Now, with regards to the GHS19, as you can see, it is decorated with some milled stripes on the bridges and also milled stripes on the rotor, and we also have blued screws. So it is a decorated movement, but the rotor is sterile, and I think it would look better if they engraved with the rotor with Guanqin or a brand logo in order to add interest to it, or alternatively the specification of the movement such as 20 joules. So it's a basic movement, although credit where credit's due, they have decorated it with milled stripes to an acceptable standard, and the rotor also has milled stripes which complement the milled stripes on the bridges, which look like Coats du Genève finishing. Right, so let's discuss the movement used. Now, I want to clarify something. Guanqin, when I asked them what movement was used in this piece, replied and said it's the Guanqin caliber GL878, and they declared that they make the movement themselves. So I couldn't find any details when I googled caliber GL878, and so therefore I researched the movement, and I found that it's not actually the GL878. That's just what Guanqin call it. The movement is actually the JHS19, which is made by Shanghai Jinghe Industrial Co. Limited in Shanghai. So the JHS19 has 20 joules. It has hand winding, but it doesn't have hacking, which is a negative. It has a 40-hour power reserve, which is acceptable. Now, the reliability is unknown. I can't tell you that it's reliable, and I can't tell you that it's unreliable. I simply don't know, and there's no information available online regarding the reliability of the JHS19. The stated accuracy is also unknown. Again, there's nothing online detailing the accuracy of the JHS19, but what I can tell you is when this is fully wound to its maximum 40-hour power reserve, this one is running consistently at plus 20 seconds per day, which is fast. And plus 20 really isn't accurate, and therefore I can't tell you that it's an accurate or inaccurate movement, but I really think plus 20 is unacceptable. and Guanqin should be regulating the JHS19s they're using to a better standard, certainly within plus or minus 10 seconds per day. When I see a movement that's running at plus 20 and there's no details online of the stated accuracy, for example stating that it's minus 20 to plus 40 as per an NH35A, that is worrying. Generally speaking, when low-tier Chinese movements are sterile and unbranded, and when there aren't any stated accuracies online, it means that the movement is inaccurate and it's not something they want to advertise online because it's not a selling point. Now, if the movement is accurate, then of course they do want to publish it, and Seiko make no secret that the NH35 is minus 20 to plus 40, and in reality it's often regulated to better than plus or minus 10 seconds per day. So there's no reason to hide it. If a movement is reasonably accurate, the brand or the movement manufacturer will state it online, but if it's inaccurate and unreliable, they won't state it. So, as I've discussed, Guanqin referred to this as the caliber GL878. In reality, it's a JHS19 made by Shanghai Jinghe Industrial Co. Limited. So, Shanghai Jinghe Industrial Co. Limited have been making movements in Shanghai since 1995. Now, I don't know how old the JHS19 is. I don't know if they've been making it since 1995 or whether it's a recent movement. I think that it's a recent movement from 2022 because I can't find any other watches using it and I can't find any examples of it online, so therefore that indicates that it's a new movement rather than an old movement which has been produced since 1995. So I really can't tell you other than that. It's plus 20 seconds per day with a 40-hour power reserve, and the main negative is it doesn't have hacking. The other negative is it has a noisy rotor, and in terms of the audible rotor, it sounds as loud as a Miyota 8215, so one can hear it winding on the wrist, and also it's a unidirectional winding rotor, so although the rotor can spin bidirectionally, when it rotates clockwise it has negligible winding effect, so the rotor always has to spin anti-clockwise in order to automatically wind it to its 40 hours, and that means you're going to have to wear it for 8 to 12 hours per day, alternatively put it on a watch winder and wind it automatically for 1,200 turns per day. Now, the other thing you can do is, if you want to laboriously manually wind it, you can rotate the crown clockwise by 40 turns. 40 turns will be enough to, from a dead stop, from the movement being exhausted, the mainspring being completely unwound. 40 turns will be enough clockwise to wind it up to its maximum 40 hours, but the crown isn't particularly pleasant to grip due to the overhang on the flanks to the case, and so therefore it's not going to feel comfortable to turn this 40 times to manually wind it if you don't want to wear it 8 to 12 hours per day. Right, so lastly I'll summarise the piece. What do I think of it overall? Well, when I'm considering reviewing a watch on my channel, the watch meet two criteria. It should be both excellent quality and excellent value at the respective price point. So the respective price point of this piece is $96. That is in the AliExpress sale. Really, to evaluate this piece, we need to do a Lume test, and we'll see how the Lume performs when it's charged up to the absolute maximum. So as always, I'm going to use my 100 UV LED torch to charge it up to its absolute peak. Right, so that's now fully charged, and as you can see, it is disappointing. This clearly is 2 to 3 layers of C3 Luminova. They haven't used C3 Super Luminova, and it clearly isn't 5 to 6 layers, so it's a cost-cutting measure. And as you can see, looking at the skeletonized dial, they haven't loomed any of the Arabic numerals, they haven't loomed the applied indices. We just have loom on the skeletonized hour and minute hand and the tip of the second hand. The legibility is very poor, and really one cannot read the time in the dark, which is the purpose of using loom on a watch. For example, looking at the hour hand and the minute hand, it's difficult to differentiate between them because they're both skeletonized and they both have similar area plots of C3 Luminova. It's difficult to say the left hand is the hour hand and the right hand is the minute hand. They look very similar in proportion. One can see the tip of the sweeping second hand sweeping around the dial at 21,600 vibrations per hour and a frequency of 3 Hz. But if you look at the dial, there aren't any registers. We can't see any applied indices. We can't see any Arabic numerals. There's no loom on the skeletonized dial whatsoever. So absolutely pointless to have Luminova on the hands when there's no loom on the dial whatsoever. And it's really weak performance. As you can see, it's fading to nothing fast. So very disappointing. So based upon the Lume test, I will summarise the piece. At $96, I think this is okay value and okay quality. The use of hardlex without AR coating is a clear cost-cutting measure, And the poor quality Lume is a clear cost-cutting measure. 50 metres is very weak specification. And we've got the uncertainty of the reliability and the accuracy of the JHS19, and it's unidirectional, so it's inefficient. Plus 20 seconds per day is running fast. So I'm going to be honest with you and say I'm not confident in the reliability or the accuracy of this movement. I think they should have used a higher grade of movement in this piece rather than using the JHS19 made by Shanghai Jinghe Industrial Co Limited. And really, it's deceitful saying that they make it themselves and they call it the Guanqin caliber GL878. The movement is made by Shanghai Jinghe Industrial Co Limited, not by Guanqin. So, okay quality, okay value, but I'm not going to recommend it to you for your consideration. I hope you've enjoyed my review of the Guanqin GJ16227. Please feel free to post your own comments below the video. Thank you very much.